Welcome back to TTC. Man, it's been too long since we tested some cordless ratchets. I miss these things. There's something about these tools, and today adding new Cobalt, Harbor Freight, Bauer, DeWALT's high speed that we haven't looked at before on Amazon. You just never know what you're actually going to get heading into one of these because their specs are usually so, well, useless. Not in a bad way from our perspective because it keeps things fun, not knowing, but for most of you out there looking at RPM or torque on a ratchet, comparing one model to another, man, good luck. Well, torque, that's usually somewhat closer to reality, and in fact, most of these things these days do get there, but things like, can you turn them by hand as much as another without it snapping in half? Few will tell you, and most not. And RPM, that's the kicker. All over the shop these days, higher is better. That's one good rule. I could give you one if you wanted, but we've only determined one thing, and that's that RPM is not free speed of one of these things. Here's an example, this M12 high speed, which is currently ranked #1 from our first test series on these things, is rated 450 RPM and measures over 1000 RPM in free speed, but like 130 to 190 RPM on stuff that doesn't like to turn freely, but is in no way stuck like these nylon lock nuts, and neither of those are 450 RPM. Well, today we try to topple that first place spot, accounting for things like size, weight, and primarily speed and torque. We've had some that have come close, including DeWalt, but here we got another high-speed ratchet. Kobalt's latest, that's showing 1000-ish RPM free speed, and DeWalt's high-speed ratchet, their 12-volt DCF 500B, that's rated for the exact same RPM as Milwaukee's high speed, but with more torque on tap. Something that, if it can deliver, we've been dying for using these in real life. So let's hop in to all of that. In order price, we have the latest battery-powered ratchet out from Harbor Freight, the Bauer 2185C-B. This is just 60 bucks, and in today's world where cordless ratchets are often 130, 150, 200 or more sometimes, for some reason that's saying something, and what it's saying is, in this case, it's brushed. Yeah, I'm guessing that's why it's priced this way. I'd take a $90 brushless, looking this beefy over a $60 brush model. That's just me, but what they got here is a tool that we promised to test next time we included ratchets on the channel. This is 225 RPM and 45 foot-pounds, that's the specs, and they won't be making too many headlines, but it's got something up its sleeve that we're going to be showing you. The main hurdle for these tools today is the ratchet gauntlet we got here. New nylon nuts for each tool represent some resistance for it to turn. Larger ones are more resistance, but not impossible to do like by hand with a ratchet. In order to have something to go up against here, we bought another brushed example that came out recently. This is the CC, an Amazon brand we've definitely shown before, no affiliation, simply because they are good, but other times they're terrible, and either way, that's fun to watch. This is their latest RT600B, and it costs $110. That is less than the next bare tool, though, and this comes with 2 batteries, only available this way, and a spot for a full-size slide-on charger, but only came with this barrel plug-looking guy that charges at a whopping 3/4 of an amp, about 15 watts. It has a 3/8 chunk. Haven't seen that spec before, so don't know if that's a lot of chunk or a little bit of a chunk, or if it's just a spelling accident. But no, in all seriousness, this looked a lot like the Bauer and the head. They both measure pretty much identically in that regard, so we'll get the same head size penalty on the rankings. They do look very close. This is rated at 200 RPM and 66 foot-pounds now. Let's see how they do. Bauer on the bottom. It's a good thing we speed all these up because that Bauer, it can be like watching paint dry, using it in real time. If the record holder in this gauntlet was named Usain Bolt, the Bauer is more like mundane nut here. To its credit though, these are torque values in foot-pounds here at each one of these stages that they have to not just unthread, but loosen off of from that value. And the Bauer is one of the select couple of cordless ratchets to ever, on the channel, require no assistance on any of these, just pull the trigger and away it goes, even when torqued down. Most ratchets won't do all of these by themselves and require you to lend a hand, slowing down that task, just like in real life, working on a vehicle, so that time length is included here. All that said, the CC didn't stumble, seldom seeing slight snags along the way, and finishing at 155 seconds. That's incredibly good. That time alone, for example, beats a Milwaukee Insider on this and beats a DeWalt 20-volt DCF 513. For a brush tool, in this test, that's impressive. The Bauer, well, yeah, convenient, only trigger pulls, but not fast. It's going to finish here at 223 seconds, closing in on 4 minutes. But we got to show you the Bauer's main party trick before we get to these others, because they are really bearing the lead with this thing. Brush motors are known for their instant torque, but torque on a ratchet usually comes from simple gear reduction math either way. And this 45 foot-pound rated ratchet makes for us mid-60s. And with the usual trigger bump we try on these tools, 78 foot-pounds. This thing is a Knuckle Buster 5000 in the best of ways. And that was with a 1.5 amp hour battery for a slim profile. With a 5 amp hour battery, which we tried on the Gauntlet as well, it's still slow as molasses either way. But here, 89 foot-pounds, a new cordless record on the channel. This thing is pretty cool. There is a demand for this sort of thing, certain jobs. Some of you out there will see this and know exactly what I'm talking about. Others are going to be like, that thing's slow, it's not for me. So not repetitive jobs with lots of long bolts to unthread, but plenty of air ratchets are used for similarly hard to unthread, but you don't have space for an impact sort of task. Don't know how Harbor Freight is getting their math on this one. I wouldn't blink twice if tomorrow they updated their websites and boxes to say 85, maybe even 90 foot-pounds or so. Advertised as a high torque cordless ratchet, there is a demand for that. Snap-on calls there's the brute, and that will at least give those customers a warning before they pull that trigger and maim themselves with this thing. I love stupid tools like this, that you find something unique that's not just on the specs on the box. But speaking of the box, besides the way undershot torque claim, it's also saying you can use this by hand to the tune of 240 foot-pounds, which is a great thing about cordless ratchets. You can just swing them by hand when needed, and we find, yeah, this one has no problem passing up the 150 foot-pound mark that we take all these to, up to, in this case, 207 here, sort of limited by leverage after that. You should know what you're getting, a slug when it comes to this stuff, but it's more like a shotgun solid slug. I'm keeping this guy around in case it's useful. All right, time for some high-speed action. This is the new brushless ratchet from Kobalt. This is advertising 400 RPM and 45 foot-pounds of torque. Comparing that to the high-speed M12's 450 RPM and 35 foot-pounds of torque, it might be in a little sweet spot. I've been saying for years there's no Goldilocks cordless ratchet because this thing is fast enough, but gets hung up on stuff more often than you'd hope. So a small trade-off for torque might be where things are at. This is also 129 bucks, so a fair bit less as well. It also feels super light, like oddly light as a tool by itself, but I believe that's to help offset the 24-volt battery that's going to be required to hang off the end here. 2.9 pounds with a battery, that's an achievement when needing 6 cells in series. Head size is a little bit bigger than the Milwaukee, mainly due to the easier to use forward-reverse switch. This head-to-head battle is closer than it should be with the Cobalt on top here. Because you remember me mentioning, right, how the free speed RPM and opened air is useless and not what the box specs are talking about. Well, this 400 RPM Cobalt spins freely at nearly 1000 RPM, and this 225 RPM CC only spins about 245 out open in the air. Thing is, and yes, the Cobalt is taking the CC to Gapplebee's here at the moment, I understand. The CC, once it gets down to 7/16 and half-inch thread stuff, is still rotating at about 220 RPM, while the 1000 RPM free speed Cobalt slows down to just 160 RPM all the way down here, which is, by the way, not even bad. The blue guy clearly has some torque, as evidenced by rarely needing arm swinging help. It just paints quite a picture. The Cobalt is going to finish in a blazing fast 123 seconds. That is one of the fastest ever we've recorded. And the Amazon guy, even being in that conversation, is a new one for me, crossing the line at 155. It's really not bad. We're going to need something faster to take on that Cobalt, something high speed, and that should be this. By all accounts, this is DeWALT's one and only high-speed ratchet. This is the DCF 500B. They don't advertise it as high speed, which is how it's taken us this long to test it. They simply call it their 12-volt sealed head ratchet, and well, we've tested their sealed head ratchet when it came out, which was 20 volt. It was very good, but it seemed like book closed on that. However, our viewers tell us repeatedly we should also be buying this, the DCF 500B, because unlike the 75 foot-pounds 300 RPM specs of the 20 volt, this one for some reason is 450 RPM and 50 foot-pounds. Compare that to Red Team's 450 RPM and 35 foot-pounds. It's saying it's one of these, but like 40% more torque. Yeah, I could get behind that. And like the 20 volt version, this sealed head design is sweet. You have interchangeable drives that in this case measure 12 millimeters, so no sockets that I know of fit into them yet. But in this case, also some included 1/4 inch and 3/8 square drives, and even a self-retaining 1/4 inch hex collet. Very neat, and helping to stomach the, in this case, $220 price. Yes, it's 220 bucks, so you sort of need to think about it as a 1/4 inch and 3/8 ratchet all in one, plus a 1/4 inch hex bonus. This sort of design also has more reachable, more finger friendly, don't have to pinch it with dainty digits forward reverse selector that you can even give the old South Main Auto no mercy reversey action, no lift shifting it away, and it doesn't seem to get all that mad about it. Similar head profile to this slightly smaller M12 due to this flat head design. This is also the lightest ratchet DeWalt has ever come out with and smallest head overall. They sort of threw the whole kitchen sink at this thing. Let's see if it pays off. And it does. Not going to bury the lead here. It's going to pass up the Cobalt. It's about $100 more as a bare tool, so I'll try not to sound too shocked here, but it's also good when those dollars do meet reality. A tool with 50 more RPM and 5 foot-pounds more torque does smaller stuff faster. It does larger stuff without being bogged down as much and require hand help on 2 less torqued bolt levels. It's a rare case in ratchet specs where figures being higher than another did what you'd expect, which is almost never the case for us, but does make them fun to test. This isn't why we're here though. We're here while DeWalt showed up to take names. Sitting perched atop our ratchet ranking is the M12 high speed, and it's been asleep for a few years here at the top. Time for yellow to try and poke the sleeping little giant. The M12 on top here is an angry little hornet. It's fast, as we showed with its 1000 plus RPM free speed. The little stuff it tackles like nothing else in cordless to date, as the DeWalt here is more like 600 in open air free speed. But by the time we're at the 20-25 foot-pound torque levels, it's needing some help to get things started. Hey, that can happen to anyone at this age, okay? But the DeWalt, not so much. Each time it meets one of those torque down bolts, on this side of things, it's just a button press away from loosening it, which means the DeWalt starts to catch up. By the time we get towards the end here, the M12 is turning these at 180 to 200 RPM once loose, and the DeWalt 300 RPM, it's just blazing through this tougher stuff. That mixed with it not needing manual assistance, which we're used to using on that M12 until the very end, yeah, it's able to do it by 1 second. 99 seconds to the DeWalt, 100 seconds for the M12. We've bought over 30 models of these things, new hardware each time. This is the first tool to get into the double digits in seconds. Well done. But it does weigh a bit more, slightly larger in the head, and cost more, so it has some torque to make to shave off some of the points here. Points being something you don't want in this ranking in order to come out on top. The Bauer is a beast, 89 foot-pounds. It's rocking it here. That's not going to be top today. The CC, this one sees about 50 foot-pounds of the 66 advertised. And these tools do take Makita batteries as well, so you can see some improvement up to 58 with one of those, but that won't be included in its score as usual. You shouldn't need to own Makita batteries if this thing only comes with batteries. We take all of these past 150 by hand, and this made it to around 200 foot-pounds without issues. It's pretty stout. The Cobalt gets to around 41 foot-pounds, and then won't go any further with a 2 amp hour battery that we'd recommend using. With a 4 amp hour ultimate output, that's 42, and that's just as far as it's gonna go. Advertises 45, it almost made it there. By hand, this one breaks at 140. Very much not happy after that. The head is broken inside, kind of unfortunate. The last Cobalt we've taken to like 220, no issues. Not saying you should use these tools past 100 by hand, but we try all of them past 150, and some do break. It's not unheard of, but worth knowing about. Not one DeWalt we've ever tested has made its torque claims. They're always higher. This one is no exception. Made about 51 foot-pounds with a 2 amp hour 12 volt battery and 56 with a 5 amp hour battery on this 50 foot-pound rated tool. That's very nice. Makes sense it made it through that much of the gauntlet without needing much help. There is bad news, then good news, then bad news sort of story on this DCF 500 though. It breaks. That's the bad news. The good news is it appears to only be the drive adapter. They use this thin ring of metal around the head to connect the hex portion that goes into the tool with the square drive. I understand the need for the push release. This works much better than the M12 Insider they needed to update and fix from that adapter being pulled out with all these sockets. So this design does work, but on this 12 volt guy, these adapters are small enough that they're not leaving enough meat on here, and I think this can be easily remedied. There's room for a thicker wall on this guy. So the good news is this tool will still work, and this is an interchangeable part. should be easy enough, hopefully, to replace. The bad news, again, though, 128 foot-pounds is not a lot. Well, it is and it isn't. In this crowd, it's one of the lower breakage points, so hopefully they have a rethink on one of these bits. It's like the easiest fix ever. It's just in the box with the tool. Time for some totaling. You don't want points here, and they get dinged with them due to tool weight, head size for access, and price here. And this one adjusted down to bare tool per usual. And then gauntlet time, the longer it took, the worse it's looking for them, listed here in seconds. Then some of that score is reduced by how impressive they are in torque. Speed and torque usually go hand in hand. When you give to one, you take from the other in the form of gear reduction, so it does make some sense. Minus 89 points for Bauer the Beast, minus 50 for CC, minus 42 for Cobalt, and minus 56 for DeWALT, which totals 226, 199, 158, and 136. Putting the Bauer in the bottom third, the CC by far the best Ratchet off the Amazon we've ever bought, and beating some real names here. That's well done. The Cobalt ranking very high, tied with the Ryobi here that costs the same exact amount. As a matter of fact, this specific Ryobi is very good, so the Cobalt is a strong entry here. I like it. And the DCF 500 in first. It's taken us this long to top the M12 high speed, and it did it almost wholly by performing about the same in speed, but with more torque on tap. And that's been our only complaint, if any, about this M12, which is very good. It just slows down, stops, or won't undo certain things that you think it should in the day-to-day. So we did find a bit of a beast hiding in disguise, and we may have found also the Goldilocks Ratchet at long last. If you're surprised Team Yellow's 12 volt is all the way up here and not 20 volt, don't be. Their last 12 volt Ratchet also turned out to be better than any of their 20 volts for reasons we cannot explain. Must be two different teams working on these things. I hope this is something they can easily improve because it's just included in a bag with the tool. Switch that out to a new part number and problem solved. Or just don't use the cordless ratchets above 120 foot-pounds by hand, I guess. I don't know. They threw everything at this tool feature-wise, and I'd say most of it stuck. Always gotta love an episode we get to work on when the rankings are all turned on their head. We wouldn't be able to do it without you guys. Thanks for making it possible for us to buy all these tools and basically have fun with them on camera and tell you about them each Friday. Click some stuff below to join us in that, and thanks for watching.